Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I just want to discuss the Venom movie because I finally saw it, and this isn't like, like a typical like review or something like that. It's just, like I've done with like other Marvel movies and stuff like that. It's just me just discussing about it. Even though I say Marvel, obviously this is Sony Marvel, so it's very different because obviously it doesn't flow into the MCU continuity, even though it could. In general, if you haven't seen Venom and you're just like coming across it, you're like, oh, what are your general thoughts? I liked it. It went directions I wasn't expecting it, because I remember when it was initially coming out, like the thought was like, oh, what kind of movie is it going to be? Is it going to be horror? Is it going to be this? Like, even now it's kind of like, oh, we're going to deal with like the duality of like being Venom, and Eddie Brock maybe really dive into it so it could potentially go down that route. Obviously, if you don't know and haven't heard, because I went into this movie knowing this, but it's a buddy comedy in certain regards, so that kind of took me by surprise, because for me, I'm not that well versed in comic books, but my experience when it comes to Spider-Man tends to be like, the movies as well as the many iterations of the cartoons that I've seen over the years as I've grown up. So to me, seeing a funny Venom caught me off guard. So I think that aspect was very strong in the movie. I liked every other aspect of the movie too. I like the way it kind of flowed together in a sense. I don't know how generally people felt about it. I know people in general, like critically wasn't that well received, but like people in general kind of liked it. It's kind of what I've heard, but I haven't really heard people really break it down. But I walked away very much enjoying it, so take that as you will. So going forward, I will be going into spoilers. So if you don't want to, like I said, it's just more of a discussion, but if you don't want to take part of it, that's fine. You just want it for that little bit of like, oh, what are your general thoughts? Then that's that. And so I'm just going to go more in depth. So if you don't want to spoil the movie because you haven't seen it yet, or you just don't care, then yeah, just no spoilers going forward. So interestingly enough, with the whole Eddie situation, like I was just mentioning earlier, like I don't really know comic books that well, but even taking separation, like it surprised me with the whole Venom thing kind of being a little funny. Well, not like a little bit, because I figured there'd be some comedy in it just based on like some of the stuff from the trailers that we also see in the movie, but I didn't expect it to be such a heavy bond between the two. I thought that was kind of interesting, of like a comedy element between them like that, but it also took me by surprise is like Eddie's kind of he's a decent and good guy in this. I mean, I guess because in my head, like when I think Eddie Brock, I think scumbag, which is totally unfair, because even amongst the animated stuff I've seen, I mean, it also depends on a lot of things. It depends on like Eddie's relationship to Peter. In some continuities, it's very different, because sometimes they grew up best friends, and others they're just rivals and stuff like that. Sometimes they don't really even have that much of an interaction. Like obviously this movie kind of plays into like, oh, they don't interact at all. They don't even know about each other's existence, because Peter's still like in high school, that whole thing nevertheless. But like I said, I still in the back of my head, I think it's because Eddie from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon was kind of a douche. So I think I kind of associate him with that, even though I've subsequently, like I said, seen other versions where he wasn't, but still. And it actually kind of taught me to be like, oh wow, I thought Eddie would be like, oh, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get the scoop. It's like, no, like even he was kind of like, when it was all said and done, when he kind of lost everything, he was like, yeah, I'm kind of done with caring about humanity's well-being and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, you were actually a decent dude. You're trying to get to the bottom of stories. You weren't trying to be like, ooh, slimy. And it seemed like he was slimy in a lot of iterations and stuff like that, especially when it came to his job and everything. But it's like, oh, he was trying to get to the truth of everything. He ended up losing his job because of it, because the way he went at Drake. Drake's got connections and stuff like that. He's kind of looked at probably as almost like this humanitarian. So it's like you going after him. He talks to people and gets you fired. And then on top of that, his fiance and dumps him because it's like, oh, you used files that like my law firm were getting because we work with the law firm I work for works with the Life Foundation. So it's like screwed over there, and so Eddie's life kind of falls apart. The only benefit to it is like, because I brought this up when I was talking about, I did not know this, but typically all that kind of happens to Eddie in the comic books, plus he finds out he has cancer. Luckily enough, in this movie he doesn't find out that he has cancer, but it's still kind of like beaten down, and it's just kind of like rough part of things. I guess he I guess he kind of got blackballed because he never really got another job like that. That was probably the only opportunity really there. We did kind of hear a little bit about New York. They said something, I forgot what it was. It was like the Daily something. It wasn't the Daily Bugle, which was kind of interesting. It was something else, but it's almost like, oh, you kind of got ran out of New York because of just like your way. I guess his relentlessness to go after a story, But I guess in a good way, he wouldn't kind of back down. So I guess that kind of got to run out of town. And then the whole situation of his ex getting a new person in her life dead. And I like that whole exchange of being like, man, I'm actually a huge fan. And she's looking at him like, what? He's like, well, come on. He took down a lot of, you know, some terrible people. It's like, all right, Dan, you're not too bad. And I didn't expect Dan to kind of play a part in a movie like he did. I thought that was kind of interesting, especially because it's like Eddie's getting sick and stuff like that. It was also interesting. Well, because I do apologize because I'm going to be all over the place, but I thought it was kind of interesting because I've never really known the science behind like how and why the symbiotes operate the way they do. Like they can't survive in our oxygen-rich environment, which makes sense. They're from a different planet and stuff like that. I mean, granted, they came from a comet, but they didn't really delve too deeply into the whole like, oh, we're from another planet. I don't know if that's something they'll ever really dive into because that's something I'm not even that familiar with. I never really knew that. I knew they were aliens, but I didn't know there was literally a whole planet of symbiotes. That was kind of interesting. They did kind of talk about the hierarchy, which I thought was interesting because like Venom is like, oh yeah, technically on my planet, I'm kind of a loser. Like you, Eddie, you're a loser because even he was talking about that. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And that's why he was like, me and you are kind of the same. We're kind of losers. Riot's kind of like the team leader and stuff like that. And so for Venom, it's like, oh, the reason why I want to save the world, part of the reason is because if the other symbiotes come here, I'm going to go back to being the loser. So what I'm going to do is stop them from coming here, and then I can kind of run and kind of do my own thing. Well, we can kind of do our own thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like that wasn't all his reasoning, but it seemed like it was a good chunk of his reasoning, and I thought that was so fascinating just because it's like, I kind of want to run things here. I don't want to be a loser anymore. So like we could do a lot of stuff together, Eddie. Which even the fact is that he was kind of hiding from Eddie, the fact is that it was still killing him. I guess they hadn't fully assimilated together yet. They had to a great degree. That whole chase scene was so interesting. Like, I mean, in general, like how Venom fought with Eddie, I thought was so interesting. And like, the fact of the matter is Eddie was kind of doing like sick moves of like how he fought in his apartment like that. I was like, that's so dope that like Venom moves his body in a certain way, almost like he's got some martial arts moves like that, and kind of like a guy like holding a guy's arm out and then like flinging Eddie towards him to kind of almost like break his arm. I was like, that's so interesting how that's done. Controlling his legs and stuff, making it like how the symbiote flowed off of him was so interesting. Even like I said, even when he was on the bike, that whole situation, like sliding on top of the symbiote as he's like doing like a sharp turn like that, like that whole thing, that whole sequence was amazing in my eyes. I actually felt really bad in general for Skirth. I was like, oh man, I hope like she got out of that whole situation. It's like, no, she ends up getting sacrificed like that. The moment he was like, oh, tell me who's got the symbiote, and I was like, because for her it's like, no, because it might actually kill Eddie, so she actually kind of felt bad because she was putting Eddie in that situation. But maybe there's a part of her that's like, no, I'll believe Drake, he's going to change things going forward. And then he put the symbiote there and let it kill her. And he ends up getting mad later on because the symbiote died. It's like, well, you're the one that put it in that situation in the first place. I get it. You were expecting other people to watch it after it killed Scarf and then like it bounced. But I just thought that was kind of interesting because it's like, it's actually your fault that it died in the first place. That's another element too. Like it never crossed my mind to think like the other symbiotes would actually die. The one that's actually Riot ends up traveling all across the planet. I thought that was kind of interesting too because like Venom was like, no, you thought you found us and we found you. They probably knew that something or some creature would come to that comet at some point in time and come examine it and stuff like that. And it's like, no, we found you. Not unless it's a situation of like, oh no, we knew Earth was in that direction. We were heading your way anyway, particular. I don't know. But it's kind of interesting because it's like, we kind of sought you humans out. You didn't seek us out. It's because it's all about controlling the world, the whole eating people thing. I guess maybe because the whole like, it like deteriorates your body at such a fast rate because it's like, they constantly have to eat because Eddie just trying to eat and shove food down his mouth just because. I think it's just like, they have that type of relationship because the symbiote eats away at you little by little. So I guess it affects your metabolism to a very high degree. So you need to constantly eat because that's something that was never, you know, another aspect to this whole like symbiote situation. I feel like that was never brought up before either. Because it's interesting too, when you compare like Riot and Venom. I never, because I know some of the different symbiotes have different abilities and stuff like that. And obviously like Riot can do the more shape-shifting into weapons. I always associated that with a Carnage situation. I mean, to be fair, Carnage and Venom are the only symbiotes I've ever had experience with. Like I talked about it before, it was only until like fairly recently, like maybe like a year or two ago, I found out about there being other symbiotes other than Carnage and Venom. So I thought that was, you know, that's kind of interesting, but I don't really know that much about the others. I don't even really know their names. But like I thought the whole shape-shifting was only, well, I mean, to be fair, like Venom can do it too, but not to like the weaponized extent. I don't know if it's ever done that before. Weaponized himself like that. I mean, obviously we see it in a movie because he kind of creates shields to block, but it's more like it's using itself as kind of like, oh, here's a blob of me used as a shield. I mean, there's one point during the fight against Riot, it actually makes a shield, but I thought that was kind of interesting. There was also that little thing between him and I thought was kind of neat, where like she showed up with Venom on. I was like, that's so interesting, because I think maybe that's playing into, because I know like continuity wise, I do know there's at least one other person that's picked up the Venom suit. I mean, technically too, because I know Flash becomes, he's not the Lethal Protector, is he? I forgot his whole situation, because I know about it because I remember reading about it years ago, him getting the Venom suit, but also in Ultimate Spider-Man, like it doesn't operate the same way, because it's, I don't know if that's a Lethal Protector, that might be something else entirely. I think, because, well, it might not be. I don't know. I don't remember what Flash's name is when he's got the Venom suit on, which that could be an interesting, I doubt they'd go down that route, but that means, like, I mean, he is more appropriate. He is Peter's age in the MCU, so that potentially could be something they go down. I don't know. That just me randomly thinking of that. Because that was more so like it got weaponized because it absorbed other weapons and stuff like that and kind of bonded with Flash in that sense. But it's like, other than that, Venom doesn't typically have any weapons. Obviously, he doesn't have any webs because he's never met Spider-Man, so he's just kind of using the tendrils, which once again, I take it back to Ultimate Spider-Man, the video game, because that's how Venom got around. Venom did like the whole jumping thing and just like crawling up buildings like that. Like, it made me really think of that, and the whole eating people too thing, like biting that one dude's head off, and like him having such a problem with it. And he's like, you just literally ate that guy. Even Emma's like, oh my god, I just bit that dude's head off. He's like, I know, I've been where you're at. It's very messed up. But that was another element too, like her coming into the story like that, finding out about everything he was doing. When she was freaking out, it's like, oh my god, let's get to the hospital now. And once again, Dan playing a part in it. She's like, no, just because I don't want you to think there's anything between me and it. He's like, no, I'm not even talking about it. I'm literally talking about the alien thing that's in there, what that whole deal is. And it's like, oh, and then it escaped, got inside a dog and stuff like that. It just, that was such an interesting dynamic to me. Like, the moment he got into the MRI and started freaking out, I was like, right. I was like, sonic waves and stuff like that. I guess, like, for whatever idiotic reason, it never crossed my mind when I was watching the trailer that that's what that was representing. It's like, right, because Venom doesn't like sonic waves or fire. I like that he kind of brought that up. I also like that it kept getting, Venom got offended every time he called it a parasite. He's like, no, I'm not a parasite. It's like, ooh, who is she? And this and that. And just like the way he talks to Eddie, that like that back and forth between them is actually really good, really funny. Especially when Eddie went to, you know, go see his former boss to leak the evidence that he found. I thought it was so interesting, where he's like, jump. And then Eddie just goes over to the elevator and calls him a pussy for it. I love that. That was just like little stuff like that, just build up over the course of the movie. I thought was kind of interesting. Him even telling Venom at the end of like, no, this is how we're gonna work together. This is, we can't hurt bad people. Only people we should touch or even hurt, and even on a slim, small chance of eating, are bad people. No hurting good people. So it's actually interesting because, I mean, maybe there's more references sprinkled in that, you know, I'm not aware of because I don't know comic books that well, but it's kind of, I mean, obviously because it's the whole association with Marvel, this is Sony kind of doing its own thing while kind of collaborating with Marvel, so they probably don't go too far out of mentioning certain things, because it's like I brought up earlier, like they don't mention the Daily Bugle, they mentioned something else called the Daily something, but I don't remember. But and like, yeah, we got Jameson's son, because typically he's the one that goes out there to, you know, because he's an astronaut and everything, he's typically part of the whole Venom storyline. But it's like, we never actually got J. Jonah Jameson, if I'm not, but it's like, we haven't really introduced the Daily Bugle in the MCU yet, so that's why I'm kind of like, I guess because Marvel's got plans for that potentially in the future, but this does set him up, so it does set up JJ in a sense. You don't really get to see him, but it does set him up, so, because we still don't know in the grand scheme of things like where this operates. Does this take place in the Amazing Spider-Man universe with Andrew Garfield? You'd assume, like, it's very ambiguous, I think, to the point so that it can determine, like, okay, like, obviously Venom was successful in the grand scheme of things, so it's like, okay, it seems like they're already kind of working on potential sequel. I kind of talk about that in a little bit, but also at the same time, it's like, okay, so this means they're bringing this over to the MCU. It's already been establishing as its own, so you could easily bring it over because it's like, hey, it's already had its own movie, bring it into this whole franchise. But it's like, especially where Spider-Man stands now, I think you'd be very particular because of the whole events of Infinity War, but not just that, just like what they plan to do with the Spider-Man property going forward is kind of spoilers, especially if you've avoided it for whatever reason, because I talked about that recently. A lot of people don't know about the MCU going forward simply just because like they don't have it blasting in their face all the time. I kind of do just because of the stuff I watch, and typically just because also the stuff I'm subscribed to on YouTube, that whole situation. So nevertheless, I'm curious to see if they will integrate Venom into the MCU or not. I won't lie to you, there was a part of it that was actually surprised because it was at the end and she was like, because when like Venom, he's like goodbye, and he was like, oh, did he actually die? I was like, I thought what we find out is like later on a little piece comes back to him and it's like, oh, Venom's still alive. But it's like, no, they cut to it and make it seem like, oh yeah, Venom is actually 100% gone. And then that conversation happens of Venom being like, no, we're gonna get her back because she belongs with us. It's like, what about that kiss? It's like, no, that was your buddy's idea. Just like that whole, like I said, I can't believe that happened. Like I wasn't like I figured she'd know everything, but I didn't expect she'd be like neck deep in anything. I thought she'd probably see Venom or something like that, but putting it together that it being Eddie, I didn't expect that. But to be fair, you know, she literally saw Eddie turning back from it and she was like, what the hell, you know, type of thing. So I think that's so interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting going forward because now she knows that, wait, Eddie, do you have something to tell me? Because it's like the way he's talking to him, so I was like, wait, what? So I thought that was kind of neat. So I'm interested to see where that goes, especially because Venom's like, oh no, she's going to be ours. Like we'll get her back, you know. But I also like that was kind of also like the whole thing. Like I said, Riot was trying to get back into space using Drake. I mean, he wanted to bring all the symbiotes here because it's like, oh, like, you know, so that we can come together, survive, like, because eventually, you know, the way humans are running up resources, doing all this terrible stuff on this planet, we're going to eventually kill it. So we need to be able to adapt and survive in other environments. And like he thinks the symbiotes are the key to all of that, even though the symbiotes are just going to come here, eat and consume everything and everyone. But there's that. Once again, I'm just surprised that like all the symbiotes ended up dying, especially Riot too, because I was curious about that because obviously we get the introduction of Cletus at the end, Cletus Cassidy, played by Woody Harrelson, which like that was already kind of like already out there. I didn't expect to see him with the wig on and everything. That kind of caught me off by surprise, but I know that Cletus is like typically a redhead in the comic books and stuff like that. I do like that he's like, oh, when I get out of here, I'm going to be all kinds of carnage. It's like, okay, nice. But typically in the comic books, I don't know Carnage's origin because I'm like, there's none of them here on this planet anymore. So how does Carnage come about? Because if I remember correctly, Carnage is a part of Venom that splits off. So something's going to happen in some shape or form that's going to lead to that, you know? So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't talk about it much, but I do like the fight of Venom versus Riot. It was really nice, kind of showcasing like the differences of their abilities, kind of like the outclassedness of it. Like Venom being outclassed because even Venom's like, yeah, he's got a whole bunch of shit that you don't know, you wouldn't believe. And the fact of the matter is like, what are our chances? He's like, 0. And he's like, well, fuck it, let's save the world. So, but like him like creating spikes like that and stuff like that, I thought that was so fascinating. I also like how he got to the life foundation by just like jumping from one body to the next like that. But also like that point where it's just like, it's like you see Eddie and Drake kind of like right there while like the symbiotes are kind of torn away a little bit, and just like it was in the trailers and stuff like that. But to me, I still think like people might have their problem because it's like, oh, it's just a CG fight. I don't care. I think it looks so sick of just you seeing them in the middle and these hulking like masses of blobs or like that, because obviously you can still make out their features, their teeth and stuff like that. And I just think it looks aesthetically neat. So I thought that was kind of a sick fight, just like, especially like, I guess for whatever reason in my head, I just never expect Venom to be, because Venom's so big and bulky, it never crossed my mind. Venom is very agile, like just the way it was like backflipping and stuff like that. Like even in its hulking size, it's not just like it's doing backflips and like jumping back and stuff like that. Like I don't know why, it just like its mobility kind of surprised me. I mean the same thing for Riot's, but I guess it's also like even without using its tendrils, like shooting off a tendril so it can swing around and stuff like that. Even that was something like that's kind of an added thing, but just on its own, like its mobility kind of surprised me. I don't know, because I guess I never, in my head, I guess maybe that's why the webbing is always a necessary thing to kind of represent, like give Venom a lot more mobility in a sense, just like Spider-Man has, you know, his webbing as a mobility and stuff like that. So, and like I brought up earlier, obviously Venom is getting a sequel because it was successful. I think I recently heard that like that was kind of like kind of getting a greenlit situation. So it's like, well, what does that mean going forward? Because obviously like Sony's kind of like, hey, we're benefiting from this, so we might kind of keep this our own thing. And also the MCU's got its own plans with the whole Spider-Man portion of the property. Obviously it's kind of a weird sticky situation just because it's like, Sony typically kind of has more of the rights in some regards, but Marvel has rights to those rights. It's a whole complicated situation because it's not like Marvel 100% owns all that. Like it's a partnership between them and Sony, and there was all that stuff a while back being like, oh, that might not, I'm not going to get into that whole complicated situation, but it does lend itself to be like, so what are the plans going forward with that whole situation? Like, are you going to introduce a Peter Parker in that situation? Like, I would assume it would be, because I'm trying not to talk around the whole MCU thing because it would be spoilers even where the MCU is right now, but it's like their whole Spider-Man situation, like, would we see an integration in that regard, like I was bringing up earlier, or what? Would Eddie go to New York? What's going on there? Like, because obviously we've already set up our next villain, and that's Cletus, but it's like, well, how do you go about that? Because, I mean, once again, I don't know the comic book, so I don't know how you even go about introducing Carnage. Like I said, I think he comes from Venom, but I don't know how that situation comes about. Will we ever see Venom with the white spider logo? Because I hope we do, because I think that's like one of my favorite aesthetic aspects about Venom is also like the black, but also like the whole white. I guess that's also because it just, you know, because obviously Punisher has a very similar color scheme, the whole black and like white skull, the similar, like it works so well together. So that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, I want him to get the spider emblem, whatever reason it is, like, you know, because he didn't get it this movie because they probably still haven't determined like what they're going to do with that. So I'm curious, will we see integration first or will we see a sequel first? I kind of feel like we'll see a sequel first because also, because once again, like, you know, Sony's doing its whole thing, like the whole Into the Spider-Verse thing. They've got this, they've got other plans for other like Spider-Man continuity stuff that doesn't directly involve Spider-Man. Either way, I'd be very interested. Like, I'd be so excited and interested to see what they did with a sequel. Would I want to see a Spider-Man, you know, collaboration more? Yes, but if I can't get that, I'm fine with getting a sequel. I still want the Spider-Man thing just because I want Spider-Man and Venom to come together. I don't even know how they would do that considering this storyline, but I mean, I guess it's kind of is doing its own thing, so it's kind of okay. Just because it's like, you know, Eddie and Peter don't have the connection that they probably typically do in the comic books and stuff like that, but it's kind of like, hey, maybe there's some continuity out there that's kind of similar to this where like Eddie and Peter kind of have their differences in the same regard. Like, I don't know like how they'd handle that, but I don't know. That's just, you know, me randomly off some random thoughts. I don't know how they'd go about doing all of that, but it's what I'd want to see. I'm sure it's what a lot of people want to see, just because me personally, you know, it comes down to the person to person, but to me, Venom's my favorite Spider-Man villain, and I think because I like, because it's all, but typically that is also what Venom typically means to Spider-Man, because it came to Peter first before it went to him, but in this case, it went to Brock first. So does that mean at some point Eddie would lose the symbiote? It finds that Peter really likes Peter, or like, you know, because there won't be that animosity. To be fair, because they haven't really set Venom up to be a villain. Like, obviously they use the whole anti-hero thing, but he lends himself to be more of a hero, especially in this regard. So I don't know, like, would there even be any animosity? Would there even be a problem? You know, maybe it'd be kind of a thing of Venom being like, yo, Spider-Man is stepping on our toes. He's trying to, this is our playground. We should be the ones running things, but he around here, you're doing his own thing. So it's kind of like, no, we got to stop him type of thing. I don't know. Especially because Eddie's got the whole thing of like, no, we're going to be a good guy. Not unless he starts getting jealous or something. It makes you wonder, will he start getting attention and being like, oh, San Francisco's got its own hero, Venom, stopping crime and stuff like that. I mean, granted, we saw a little bit of that obviously at the tail end, which I'm actually so surprised at that whole thing, that scene from the trailer at the convenience store. I did not realize that was going to be like the end of the movie. I didn't expect that. It never crossed my mind until we got there. I was like, all right, because that scene never showed up in the movie so far. So I was like, okay, interesting. Like I said, I don't know. These are just kind of my thoughts about how they potentially could handle that, all that, but I could be 100% wrong. But that's enough of me just rambling on. That's really all I want to talk about. So to the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.